Hello friends, welcome to day 2, day 4, I don't know, day 5 of the new world. Missing you all and hoping you're doing well. Wanted to offer some things online as we move through this period to hopefully let you keep up with some of the basics of what we do in Aikido so that when we come back, we'll be good to go and can jump right back into our training. So I wanted to start today with something that I find very useful. I know Terry finds it very useful as well, and Chiba Sensei emphasized a lot in our training, which is the practice of Zazen, or just basic seated meditation. The scholar D.T. Suzuki one time said to O Sensei that Aikido is moving Zen. So it's got a long history of being associated with Aikido, although it comes from a slightly tradition. Now, generally you'll hear about Zen in the context of Buddhism. The way I'll talk about it today is as a tool for all of us to get more physically centered, more mentally steady, so that we can be of the best use to ourselves and other people as we move through this difficult period. This is also the way Chiba Sensei presented it. He presented it to his Aikido students as a strictly secular, strictly conditioning practice for integrating your body and your mind, but no need, if you're not inclined, to bring Buddhism along for the ride. And in fact, you'll find a meditation in pretty much any of the world's major religions in some form or another. So the one we have comes from Zen and other practices, but doesn't necessarily have any religious content if you don't want it to, and is physically and mentally and otherwise very, very helpful practice for anyone. So, Zazen, seated meditation, the basics as we do them, as Chiba Sensei and our Zen teachers also present it to us. A couple of basic things that you need to do. You need to establish a strong grounding to the earth. You need to sit up straight, and you need to let your breath come very deeply into your body, in fact, all the way down into your belly, which I'll talk about in a moment. So let's start with the posture or the grounding of yourself. Most important thing for Zazen is to create a tripod between your tailbone and your two knees, if at all possible. Most of this will be dictated by the flexibility of your hips. So if you are not terribly flexible in your hips, there are some modifications you can do, but work on it, okay? But generally speaking, what we want to do is get both knees down on the floor. The tailbone sits on generally some sort of cushion. In formal practice, we use this style of cushion, which is called a zafu in Japanese. And it's just anything that elevates your butt a couple of inches off the floor. A little bit more maybe if you have flexibility challenges in your hips, but not way up in the air either. So you want to have the feeling that your tailbone is really rooted in whatever cushion you're sitting on top of. Folded up blankets work well, yoga blocks work well. Again, anything that gets you up off the ground a little bit. So root that tailbone into whatever it is you're sitting on here. Let your knees relax down onto the floor. Okay? And then we say you want to sit up straight or erect. Now, one point of clarity about sitting up straight. Sometimes when you tell people to sit up straight, they go like this. You can see I'm kind of pulling my chin up, pushing my chest out, and most critically, I'm making this kind of curve with my hip at the bottom of my spine. You don't want this. This will eventually make it difficult for you to breathe properly. So you want to let your hip roll down. If you think of your pelvis like a bowl, your pelvis is going to roll like this a bit. So rather than your tailbone sticking this way, you want your tailbone sticking down. Okay, it's subtle, but it's a big difference between this, which becomes very tight, and this, which is more relaxed. But once you've got this position, think about, there's a couple of images we like to use. One is that your top of your head is pressing against the ceiling gently. So it's floating upward toward the ceiling, or somebody's pulling a string tied to the top of your head. Whatever image of your head floating up toward the ceiling works for you. Another image that's a little bit more martial is that your spine is like a spear stuck in the ceiling, which is a little bit more martial arty, I guess. But again, you want to be careful not to strain to get up as high as you can. Just naturally sit straight up and down. So that's your spinal posture. With your legs, you have a few options. This is sometimes called Burmese style. In the West, we often call it Indian style, or I don't know if we still call it that or not, but when we were kids, we called it Indian style. The classical style for sitting is so-called full lotus, where you take one ankle and put it on top of this thigh, you take the other ankle and put it on top of this thigh. You'll notice I'm not demonstrating it for you because I can't do it. If you have any kind of strength in your legs, and if you don't have very flexible hips, full lotus can be very difficult. So I wouldn't recommend it to start out unless you know for certain that it's a posture you can maintain. Most people can't, and that's fine. So you can do Burmese style. You can do what they call half lotus, where you put one ankle on the opposite thigh and the other one is tucked underneath. If you do this style, I recommend that you then either every other sit or at some regular interval, put the other ankle on top so you don't develop an imbalance in your in your hips. So this is half lotus. The one that many of us sit, I've heard lovingly referred to as half-assed lotus, which is like a half lotus, but it's sitting on your calf instead of on your thigh. Again, it's a little bit more, I guess, advanced or farther up the leg at least than sitting Burmese. But to begin with, it doesn't matter all that much. So next thing we need to take care of, you can also sit Seiza. So you can take your cushion or a Seiza bench if you have something like that, put it between your legs and sit Seiza. Also fine because again, notice both knees are down. My tailbone is rooted in the cushion. So this is a good option if you have trouble with your knees or a lot of trouble with your hips. So feel free to experiment. The main thing is that you have your knees down, tailbone rooted in your cushion so that you can erect your spine and sit up straight without straining. So now, with the hands, I'll stay in Seiza since I'm here already. A couple of different things you can do. Again, we just need to give everything something to do. Doesn't matter, but the main thing we typically do around here is you take your left hand and grab the tip of your thumb with your right index finger and right thumb. Curl that all together and fold it around to make a fist, or put your palm around your right fist. Bring it right into your tanden, so your lower abdomen, right below your navel, and let it sit there. This is a very stable, very easy way to hold your hands. You don't want to introduce tension, so you're not clenching this, just putting your hands in that position and let it sit ideally in your lap. Okay. The other one that you'll see commonly, and you're certainly welcome to do this, is to take the back of your left hand and put it on your right palm and make an oval with the tips of your thumbs. So this is something you'll see in other schools of Zen and in some yoga schools. Perfectly fine. This is called the Cosmic Mudra in case you're curious about that. So presumably you're holding the entire universe within that oval. Welcome to do that. This one's kind of nice because it gives you some radar about how things are going. So if your thumbs poke up, you may be holding tension. And if your thumbs droop, you might be falling asleep. So it gives you a little bit of a radar about how things are going with you physically and mentally with the thumbs in this position. But again, generally we prefer, and this comes from Rinzai, Japanese Rinzai Zen or Chinese Zen, this posture. It's easier to hold and you need a little bit less thought, I guess, involved. So ideally, however you're holding them, your palms are more or less facing upward. This is important because it opens up your shoulders. So if you let this roll like this, your shoulders can roll forward like that and you get hunched, and again, it will affect your breathing, which is going to affect how well your meditation goes. So be sure to roll your palms upward, open your shoulder and your chest up. Elbows relax down against your body. Okay. So the last thing we need to talk about is the breath. We use this so-called tanden breathing, which means basically we're going to breathe into our bellies. Okay, so when you inhale, imagine air being poured into your body, where the lower part of your body is the bottom of a glass, and the air is being poured into the glass and it's filling up this part of your abdomen. So you're not breathing into your chest. As you inhale, your belly should expand. As you exhale in the beginning, it'll come back toward your spine. If you watch an infant or a baby breathe, this is how they breathe. And somewhere along the way, we get all stressed out and we forget to breathe like this and start breathing. And when you see people panicking, you see them panting and breathing up into their chest. You want to take everything out of the chest, let the air fill up your lower abdomen, warm it up, circulate around, use your imagination about that. Let your belly expand, and then naturally let it empty, and your belly will come back toward your spine. There are other breathing methods that if you get into Zen or get into another school of meditation, they'll teach you. But this is the basic one. So the first thing you want to do is settle into a nice rhythm of breathing in that way. Then finally, we can use that breath as something to give the mind something to do. So your options are many, but the basic ones are to follow your breath, Just notice how the air comes in and goes out, ideally of its own accord. And be very natural about this. Don't think about your breathing, because then you'll hyperventilate and that'll be weird. But notice your breathing. The other thing you can do is you can count your breaths, and specifically in our style of Zen, we typically count the exhalation. So every exhalation you count 1 and let it go, follow the whole breath out as you continue to hear 1, or say it to yourself if you prefer to think of it that way, 2, 3, and so on. When you do that, try to notice the end of each breath and the little space right before the inhalation comes. Don't force it. Again, just notice after you exhale, there'll be a natural pause, and then the breath will come back in of its own. Try to notice that point. It's a good focal point for your meditation. Count your exhalations up to 10, and then go back to 1, and start over again. If you go to 11, go back to 1. If you go to 15, go back to 1. If you get to 6 and you forgot what you were doing and you start doing grocery lists in your head, go back to 1. So no judgment, just bring everything back to your breath in that manner by starting over from 1 to 10. It's a very basic exercise, but one that's actually can be quite deep and quite, I don't want to say difficult, but challenging. A teacher that Terry and I both studied with gave a talk once where he said, and this was a man who'd studied Zen for 50 or 60 years, told us that he could only get to about 3 after 60 years of Zazen. So that's how deep you can go with this. You don't need to stress about it too much, but that's as far as you can do this practice your entire life and nothing else, and that would be enough. So the idea here is to let things be as they are, see them as they are, let yourself relax, breathe, and just see what's there, what's going on inside, what's going on outside. No judgment, just like watching clouds blow by in a blue sky is one of the instructions that you'll get. Man, it's a useful one. And you'll start to see what's going on with yourself. You'll start to see and hear what's going on in the environment in a way that is very similar to the concept of Zanshin that we talk about all the time in Aikido, just this present, relaxed awareness of everything going on around in your environment, which is part of why we're cultivating this as part of our Aikido practice. One other thing I'll mention, a tip that a friend of mine, actually the gentleman who officiated Terry and Maya's wedding, offers to students in his Zen school is, first of all, generally in Zen meditation, unlike some other meditations, we don't close the eyes. So your eyes are open. Sometimes people are instructed to kind of let your gaze fall down to a spot a little bit in front of you. Don't fixate on one spot on the floor though. As you sit and as you're following your breath, keep your eyes open slightly. But as you do that, allow your vision to expand and see how much of the area around you you can take in with your peripheral vision. And you'll notice simply by doing that, that will also help settle your thoughts down. So those are some of the basics for getting to the state that we're after. But ultimately for Aikido practice, what we're after is good posture, steady, deep breathing, and that awareness. That's all we're trying to cultivate. Terry's pointing at her knees. So again, think about your knees, make sure they're on the floor. And I lost my train of thought.
Solid base.
Yeah, you're solid. Yeah, I'm sorry, thank you. So the other thing we're after is that solid base. In fact, Chiba Sensei talked about, for the purposes of Aikido anyway, the training in Zazen is to make your tanden like a stone. We were at a seminar once where he had a big rock sitting on the tokonoma, stone about that big. And he says, when I sit Zazen, I'm trying to make my tanden like that. That's what we're after. So, I hope that's useful. Start however you care to. But I would recommend you start small. So, sit for 5 minutes. Once that gets to be pretty easy, sit for 10 minutes. Once 10 minutes is easy, set a timer for 20 or 25 minutes and then forget about it, and then see how far you get. You might be surprised. Once you're up to about 10 minutes of sitting, you can actually go for quite a while when you find yourself in that state. And when you're done with your sitting, the other thing I would say, and I'm echoing comments from my Zen teachers, is when you're done with your sitting, use the end of your meditation to think about others. In Buddhism, they would say dedicate the merit of your practice to everybody else in the world. So you don't have to be Buddhist about it, but again, use it as a moment to think about everything that everyone else is going through out in the entire world right now, and extend your best wishes, your protection, spirit of protection, however you want to think about it, outward. So extend your energy outward throughout the sitting and especially at the end. And that's how we can all make our way towards being of the most use to the whole world at this point. Generally, but especially now. So that's Zazen. Do some of that. We'll be coming back to you with more. Stay tuned. Conditioning exercises and other things that you can do for home practice while the dojo is unfortunately closed. And in the meantime, please stay safe, and I hope everybody's families are healthy and well. And we will talk to you soon. Thank you.